And if you fuck up the ASVAB and you don't get the score you want, that's okay. Because then you enter into service, and if you wake up with purpose and intention and you work hard, your superiors will see that, and you will be able to open up opportunities afterwards that maybe your ASVAB score didn't for you in the moment.
All right, welcome back to the ASVAB Domination podcast. I'm your host, Mickey Gamonal, and I'm very excited for a part two today with a Peace Corps returned volunteer turned officer. And yeah, Sean Lundy, welcome back. It's great to have you back, man.
Yeah, it's great to be back, man. We had a great conversation last time, so I'm glad that we're able to build on that.
Heck yeah, yeah. And you just had a birthday, so let me start by wishing you a very happy birthday.
Thanks, man. In classic Army fashion, long story, couldn't take the ACFT last drill, so obviously I had to go drive up north to an armory and make up that ACFT on my birthday because the army needs those numbers. So it was a good time.
So the important question is, did you age out of one bracket and into a new one, right? Did your standards like change as far as what you need to achieve for the test based on your birthday?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but so I turned 34.
I think
So
you're,
I
yeah, I think it's a
yeah
35. Let me see.
yeah. I mean, it was interesting because I took the ACFT on Friday, so I was 33 still. I was turning 34 on Friday, and all the NCOs who were administering the ACFT, were giving me shit because like the sir's coming in on a day off and he's doing the ACFT. We're all gonna watch and oogle at him. But there's a lot of talk of like the new ACFT standard where it's just kind of flatlined across the board,
Hmm.
and that goes into effect. I think today is the first day that
That's right.
in effect. Yeah.
Yeah, the new fitness test, no more standing ball throw. It lasted longer than the leg tuck, so it's got that going for
It's very true. I was in
it.
basic training when the leg tuck was still a thing, man, and that was more people failed that than anything.
Yep, yep. That was a weed out one for sure. So, well, anyway, it's great to have you back and happy
Mhm.
birthday. Happy, I would imagine you passed for your birthday, so that's a good
I
thing.
did, I did pass. I could celebrate that, so that was fun.
Hell yeah. That's always good. That's always good. I mean, things can go sideways on those tests. So, it's great that you
Thanks.
got through. Cool. Well, I was telling you before we started, I did want to talk specifically, a quick shout out to Jake and Tanya. I was at their wedding in Cabo, and as returned Peace Corps volunteers, one of the things that I noticed during this wedding is every single speech mentioned his Peace Corps time, even though we did Peace Corps nearly 10 years ago. And this guy has,
Mhm.
built his entire life doing like bioengineering and very impressive things, even some politics stuff going on in his life out here in San Jose. That's, very impressive life since Peace Corps, but nobody would go and speak without at least mentioning Peace
Mhm.
Corps time. And I think that's great. Like I think it's awesome that, something that you do at any point in your life can always, it's something that's always going to come up. And I guarantee you, like Jake, myself, most of my stage, most of my group, we're not thinking about Arabic. We're not thinking about the youth center. We're not thinking about everything that we had to do every single day out there. But it is something that everybody always seems to remember. So I just thought that was great.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic. I mean, that's like a through line that touches on the main themes of your podcast. Really, is that you know the hard things are what you remember. You know what I mean? You talk to anybody that's I don't know gone in the military that's gone through like NTC or gone through hard trainings or Peace Corps or even foreign service officers. You go through the suck, you go through the struggle, and in the moment it's rough. But like the stories that you sit around the campfire telling 10 years later are all about those hard times. So like when you're in the middle of it, you just have to remember that this is going to be a story you tell at some point because the easy stuff you just don't draw on that. You don't think about that.
Yeah.
So
The easy stuff's never going to come up in a wedding speech, and it's never going to be a situation like there was a point where, this speech, this guy was talking about, oh, a grand taxi. And I would imagine your Peace Corps experience, there's transportation's a big deal everywhere.
Oh boy, bush taxis.
Yeah, yeah. And so he's talking about this taxi. It's his brother who went to visit him while he was in Morocco. And he's like, they were waiting for hours for this taxi to fill up so that they could go. And his brother asked him, okay, fine, how much would it be to buy out the other seat that we're waiting for? And it was $1.25. And
Yeah.
and everybody laughs, right? But I look over to my friend who's ex Peace Corps as well at the same table as me, and I give him a fist bump. I'm like, that's 12 freaking Durham. That's
Mhm.
tomatoes, bro. Like that's real
Yeah.
money for us. So
Yeah.
it's just something you can relate to. Like going through that suck is something that you can relate to all of your
Mhm.
brothers for the rest of your life, I think is great.
No, I mean that's totally true. I was telling you too before we started recording that I had gone to a Peace Corps wedding back in September. It's two people, both of them I served with. They'd met in the Peace Corps. They fell in love. They started dating during their service, and then they continued dating afterwards. So it was really just like a Peace Corps love story, and they both are amazing people, and we're really, everybody's happy for them. They got married legally several years ago, but they held off having a wedding until September. And so it was just a big Peace Corps reunion, like a lot of the people there I hadn't seen since leaving Togo. And every table, you just kind of float around the wedding and you're just telling stories about Peace Corps the whole time. And bush taxis and transportation were a big thing, just bowel movements was always,
Yep.
always a big thing too.
Yeah.
But just those days when you went to go visit your friends in the village and you sat on a bench and looked over a field and you were drinking warm beers and you were just letting time slide by. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, there's value in that. There's value in that. And it's amazing what people remember. I saw one of my buddies and he remembers, oh, we found a pig. We because pig didn't exist, it's a Muslim country. So
Yeah.
pig exists, but it's not for consumption. And so we were able to get our hands on a wild boar for Thanksgiving or something like that. And I had
Mhm.
completely forgotten. But like these are stories that you could, build entire books off of. And
Oh,
it's
totally.
amazing that we got that experience right before joining the military. So, yeah.
No, and yeah, I mean there are so many through lines here between our two respective experiences in the Peace Corps and then in the military. And I you meet a lot of people that have done both, but they typically do that. We talked about this last time, but they typically do the military first and then they do the Peace Corps afterwards. Which does make sense. You can serve in the Peace Corps, I think, up until the age of 65, and military it's pretty hard to enlist past the age of 30 for sure. So it does make sense that it works out like that. But I do like how life has panned out for me because Peace Corps was just so hard psychologically that there's just not been anything the Army has put in front of me that has psychologically been that hard.
Hmm.
It's just the physicality. And when you're staring down the barrel of like a 2 week field training operation, in your head, you're like, 2 weeks. I can do this. This isn't, I can do this.
Hmm.
It's just, I just have to keep my body going,
Yeah.
know,
Yep, just
mentally.
one thing after the
Yeah.
other, and that's yeah, Peace Corps is uniquely suited to help you remember that all time passes. 2 years just seems like such an insurmountable amount of time when you start. And now looking back, like I said, my Peace Corps experience was almost 10 years ago. It seems like a blip. It just seems like it went so
Mhm.
fast.
But it's crazy. I was reading a book recently. I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but Once an Eagle, Anton Meyer. He was a World War II veteran. He wrote this novel in the 1960s, and it spans the time. It's about this guy who enlists during World War I and serves in the military all the way up through Vietnam, and he goes from private all the way up to general. But the book is great. It's required reading at West Point. A lot of other military schools have it as required reading, but there's a lot of books in there just about like keeping it in perspective, the value of service. Others might not. I mean, a big theme in that book too is others might not get it. They don't know why you serve and why you keep seeking this out, but you just have to remember that your lodestar, is always pointed towards leaning into the suffering and leaning into what you get out of that, you know?
Yeah.
So
No, I love it. I think like one of my things back in my college days was just suffering for peace, right? And I was an 18-year-old. I didn't really know what it meant, but I thought it was like a romantic idea at the time.
mm,
But I think it does become refined. There is a servant leadership mantra that echoes and is being, amplified as you go through, Peace Corps and then the military. So yeah, I can see also how a lot of people don't get it. When you talk about people who join the military are 1% or less of the country, and then people who do the Peace Corps is got to be less than that. And so
mhm.
we're the weirdos. There's no doubt about
Yeah,
that.
definitely. Well, I can't remember if I want to put a plug in out there. I'm involved in a company. It's called RPCV Ventures. I don't know if I mentioned this in the last call or not. We're in the process of getting the company set up. It's a bunch of returned Peace Corps volunteers. The two founders served one of them served in the 60s, the other one served in the 80s, and there's a couple other of us that have served more recently. But the idea is a venture capital firm where we raise capital and then we seek out companies founded by returned Peace Corps volunteers to deploy capital to invest in. The idea being that you serve your country, we invest in those who serve our country. And it's really interesting because these business founders, these startup founders that had done the Peace Corps, they come back and they're not done serving, but being working for a nonprofit or working for the federal government or state and local government just isn't their thing. They want to be in the business community, but they still don't want to lose that social bottom line. A lot of companies, they relentlessly pursue that financial bottom line. They owe it to their shareholders or they owe it to their bottom line, whatever it is. These are companies that also have that social impact component. And we seek them out. And I wanted to talk about this later on, but I'm bringing it up now. A big part of that is because when you're a Peace Corps volunteer, you're industrious. You are a startup founder because you're working in a resource restrictive environment. You don't know the language, or you're only recently familiar with it. You don't know the culture. You don't know the political ecosystem, the social ecosystem, and yet you're still expected to go out there and devise and implement projects and be successful and make tangible progress. That I don't know. I mean, that to me is the definition of a startup entrepreneur. You know what I mean? And so the philosophy in the firm is these are people that know how to do this. They might not have ever described it this way. They might not call themselves startup founders, but they are, and they have the scrappiness, they have the stamina, they have the wherewithal and the grit to get a business up and running and do what it takes to power through all of those friction points that exist when you're trying to launch a business and actually get it up and running. And what's interesting about that too is one of the founders who had served in India back in 1963, I believe, he always calls Peace Corps his weirdos. Like
Yep.
these are weird people, but they have good business ideas and profitable business ideas and business ideas that make the world a better place. You know what I mean? So it is pretty interesting. Bunch of weirdos.
Yeah. No, 100%. I mean, you have to be industrious. I remember I went and talked to the Peace Corps medical officer, because I had some I had some bug that was not great. And so I'm talking to the medical professional and I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling low, so I'm talking about depression as well. And they're like, honestly, and this is a host country national. This is somebody who lives in Rabat and goes to work 40 hours a week, has a full-time job, has a life, has kids, whatever. And she's telling me, she's like, if I was in your same shoes, I wouldn't know what to do. Out in the wilderness, going into different organizations, government and non-government, and saying, hey, I'm here to help. I don't speak much of the language. I don't have many of the skills, but I'm
Yeah.
here to make, I came from Las Vegas, Nevada, and I'm here to make a difference. And that is an insane pitch, right? When you think if
Yeah.
that's what your starting pitch is in business.
They're privately owned weapons. There are essentially non-existent, right? So that's where the problem came from. Is like, let's find a country out there that has some sort of like angle on a social or economic issue that doesn't exist anywhere else, right? Well, Japan does not have privately owned weapons, and so let's just say this doesn't exist. Just to be clear the government doesn't run a program like this, but let's just say the Japanese government does have like a Peace Corps type like gun control program where they send young Japanese professionals across the world to go work on gun control in countries that are perceived to have those issues, right? So let's just say this this Japanese Peace Corps volunteer shows up in the Midwest, you know, in Iowa, and they don't speak English. They had never been to the U.S. before, let alone Iowa. They are dropped off on at some farm's doorstep. They're going to live with their host family, and their job is to start a gun control community program of some kind. That that's insane.
Yep.
That person's never that is insane, right?
It's
And
an uphill battle. Uphill battle if I ever
yeah.
heard of one. Yeah, absolutely.
And so like we read that in PST, and that was the first time in my head where I was like, oh my God, if we're not being set up to fail, I mean we're the odds are against us. We are showing up in these communities and we are not prepared.
Right. Well, you can't, right? I mean, it doesn't matter how many YouTube videos you watch or how even passionate you are about youth development or agriculture or whatever it is. You you are not going to know everything about what it's going to be like when you get the boots on the ground. And that is something that transfers over to anybody who's founding anything out there. So it sounds like a great organization, and it's great that they're helping to build better organizations around.
it, you, uh, this, I, I agree when we talk about um,
So yeah, one of the things that I is like a founding philosophy for the firm has to do with the fact it I didn't bring this philosophy to the team, but it does dovetail really nicely with a lot of the takeaways I had from Peace Corps. So one of them was while I was in Village, there were other NGOs that came and showed up in the surrounding area, and Togo's not a very big country, so they would show up in the country as a whole. And it was like reinventing the wheel repeatedly, like a water security NGO would show up, they would build a well, they would take a bunch of photos for their donors, they would slap each other on the back, and then they'd leave. And then the villagers would not use the well, and you would ask them what's going on, and they're like, well, that's not, there's no, the water table's unreliable there, or that's like culturally not a place that people want to go collect water, whatever it was. The well would fall into disrepair, it'd go unused. Another NGO would show up, see that, oh, there's a well here, it's falling apart, let's fix that or build a new one, spend all this donor money, slap each other on the back, take a bunch of photos, and then leave. And the same process would play out over and over and over again. And it was just like very disheartening to see. And you'd see government organizations doing that too. So I left Togo kind of disillusioned by that. But one of the type of institutions I did see coming in that were very effective and they would stay to see it fully implemented was private sector, foundations, even companies too. One example I always use too is that, when I worked in DC, I worked for an international trade organization in the chocolate sector. And so our board of directors were all the large, chocolate companies out there, Hershey's, Mondelez, who be it. Well, these private sector companies were very, very interested in securing their supply chains. West Africa produces 80-90% of the world's cocoa that goes into chocolate. So these companies were very focused on deforestation, preventing deforestation. They were very focused on securing a living wage for farmers. So you'd see the private sector really going in and like kind of driving this change. And so going back to RPCV Ventures, one of the founding themes in the firm is that we're not saying that the private sector can do it better, but we're saying like don't discount the private sector from being able to secure those social bottom lines that nonprofits, NGOs, or government institutions work exclusively for, right?
Mhm.
So in finding Return Peace Corps volunteer founded companies, the idea is that baked into the philosophy of these companies is already an orientation towards humanity. Like they've done the Peace Corps. They understand how hard it is to secure a living around the world. They've been in these communities. They've seen these friction points that come with, getting enough food to eat, getting our kids to school, like those kind of things. So they get that. They started a company that is in part addressing some of these issues, but they're doing it from a private sector lens. They're doing it fast, affordable, and they're doing it with an eye on driving local markets. These companies don't exclusively work abroad. A lot of them do actually focus on issues here in the United States. But the idea is that lens and that philosophy exists. And I mean, it's quite effective. So that was the point I was trying to make there. Thanks
Yeah,
for sticking with me. Long journey.
no, I think that's a solid point, and I think it's something that can be overlooked. People think, oh, if you join the military, like everything's a hammer to the nail, right? Or everything's a nail to a hammer. Once you join the military, you're a soldier, or you're a Marine, you're a rifleman, you're a Peace Corps volunteer, you're a youth developer or agriculture or whatever it may be. It always translates. That's the thing, right? Especially that lost in translation life experience of being in Peace Corps. That's going to translate to every career field because I'm sure it's the same for you. Everybody comes back from country and they scatter. They chase whatever dreams that they had before. Some of them find new things that they wanted to do, but everybody's doing something. And the truth of it is you can't shake the idea that you're doing it for others. Like the fact of going into Peace Corps means that you're the kind of person that believes in service, believes in helping other people. And I think the same thing is true of the military, but it's a little bit of a different extent. Peace Corps, you have to have gone to college prior. So you have these like founded ideals that you've kind of solidified from 18 to 22, which is when you might be most malleable. Whereas if you join the military at 18, not to say that you're not service minded if you join the military at 18, you just haven't spent the last 4 years deciding of what your life principles are in the same
Mhm.
way that somebody who joins the Peace Corps may have. And you could still, by all means, there's definitely altruistic soldiers out there for days. I've seen some amazing, even Sergeant First Class, because these guys tend to promote really, really quick because they believe in helping others. And that's something that just pays dividends. It helps you throughout your whole life. So, yeah.
Well, and, when I was ending my service, I had this really fascinating conversation with another Peace Corps volunteer when we were there, and we were sitting around, we were by the beach, and we were drinking some beers, and we were smoking cigarettes, and he was just like, "Man, we had to fly 5,000 miles away from home to feel like we were trying to help the world." He's like, "There's so many issues back in the United States, like we can't we can't take our eye off the ball, I'm not saying we did it wrong, but there's a ton of stuff back home that needs focus and work too. And I say that because to your point about these NCOs that you see in the military, like they're working close to home. I mean, they have the same philosophical end state in mind as a Peace Corps volunteer. It's just that they're trying to make sure those guys on their fire team or their squad or in their platoon are taken care of. That
Mhm.
especially in the guard where a lot of what leaders do is making sure that their soldiers have a job, have health care, are taking care of their families, that they have what they need on the civilian side so that they can come to drill and they can come ready,
Yep.
education benefits like mortgages, whatever it is.
Mhm.
So and those are the NCOs doing it, right? And like I mean, that is Peace Corps right there. So
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a big reason that a lot of people join is to try and help others. It seems like a lower barrier, right? Is like, oh, these people in other countries need our help more because they don't have running water or whatever, whatever label that you put on the rest of the world or an entire country because you're young and naive. You don't realize that you can't really compartmentalize entire countries like that until you're out there. And then you realize, oh, wow, I had it completely flipped. But right. You go into the military and you're supporting your people within your squad, within your platoon, and then, hopefully company commander throughout the company and above. And it can just continue to help others. So yeah, no, I think it's great. I think people who are in service of others are always going to go further just because they'll have the support of those they helped. So that's great.
yeah.
I do want to take it back. I want to take it back to your Peace Corps aftershock as you returned from Togo. Like what was your situation? For me personally, I felt pretty aimless. I was pretty lost and I kind of floundered for a bit. And we talked about this in the last episode about how, it seems like on paper we know what we're doing. So I'd imagine something similar for you. What was your return like?
I mean, it was mentally and emotionally chaotic, I would say, to say the least. I mean, when I initially left Togo, I didn't come back to the United States right away. I flew to Rome and and then I took the train north to Florence to meet up with a buddy of mine who I'd served with. I had done 3 years, he'd only done 2 years, so he had already transitioned back to the United States. He was working in DC and he wanted to take a vacation, so he met up with me as I was, you know, lugging my whole life in a backpacking backpack up to Florence, and I was like, I cannot believe I just survived that shit. Now I'm in Florence and I'm drinking like wine and eating pizza, and my brain just couldn't handle that, right?
Yep.
Fantastic trip. Thank you, Nick. You're a saint for dealing with me. Just want to call out there. Coming home from that, you've been gone. I tried to do some networking my last couple months in Togo, but internet was not secure and there's only so much you can do from 5,000 miles away. So I showed up at home, came back to Minnesota, moved back in with my parents because I had nowhere else to go. I was basically sleeping on their couch in the basement as a 25-year-old or whatever. All my friends had full-time jobs. They had their lives figured out. Some of them had been getting married and buying houses and starting families, and here I was, and I had ratty clothes. I was malnourished and underweight. I had long hair. I was completely, the cultural customs of the United States were foreign to me at that point. I was a fish out of water. So yeah, the reverse culture shock is a real thing. It took me a long time to try to figure out what I was supposed to be doing and where I needed to be and what I needed. Just figuring out what I needed as a person to recover and get my life back on track. So I don't know if that resonates with you, but
Oh no, that was me 100%. And I would be remiss if I didn't shout out my buddy. I didn't move back in with my family because I didn't leave my family for Peace Corps. I was living with my college friends in Vegas, and I was a pain to even be around when I returned for probably a good year, if not 2 years. I was just over the top in so many ways and under the level in other ways. My culture had completely shifted, and there's something about returning where you realize that it's all just made up, and so you start giving up on everything because none of it really matters, is kind of how you feel, and you feel superior but also inferior at the same time.
yeah,
And yeah, nobody wants to be around somebody like that. Nobody
no,
wants to be around somebody who, hey, I'm better than you, but also everybody's got it so much easier than me, right? Like that's not a great place to be. And you don't even like being around yourself when you're in, I mean, at least for my experience, I did not like myself for those probably year, 2 years
Mhm.
because I was a bad dude. Like I was not fun to be around at all, even from an introspective standpoint.
Yeah, it's like that weird, it's that dichotomy between like having the superiority complex because it's like I went off and I went far from home and I was living under conditions of hardship and I was trying to make the world a better place, and like you were talking to your friends and you're like you're just sitting at home trying to make money, like, but at the same time like you got $5 in your pocket and I'm wearing ratty clothes because I can't afford to buy anything, Chaco sandals, and out at the bar for happy hour and long, unkempt hair, and you don't have a job.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm better than, and yeah, your friends look at you and they're like, what the I don't know what you went through, but I know that,
You're
if
not the
you act
same.
like that, it's just like, what are you doing? I mean, a lot of people talk. I mean, I can say that like I wasn't one of those people that came back from Peace Corps and like walked into a grocery store and was like overwhelmed by the opulence and waste and like, oh, this food could feed a village. Like I didn't have that perspective because I think I was a little bit more more socially aware than that. But I definitely I definitely just like I saw this is gonna sound bad, but coming back to the United States, what I noticed first and foremost was just everybody's on their phones.
Right.
They're just locked into their phones the whole time. And people were big. People were very large. I mean, Togo is a country where you just do not see obesity. You don't even see over people that are overweight. And I would look around and I would just see people that looked very unhappy. You know, they were stuck in their phones and they were not being very healthy. And I think I was a very hard person to be around for a long time too. You know, the experiences I had, but also me seeing, having left the United States and seeing where the values are and how people choose to spend their time and act. You know, people would talk about the reality television shows that they were watching, and I'd just be like, I cannot believe that that is something that you care enough about to talk about with
Mhm.
your friends that you don't see very often, right? Like, that's not real.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like the reality that, or what I called the reality was, it's not real either. And yeah, I was stuck in this in-between state. Like this, like I don't think I'm a real person. I'm not even sure what I just went through for 3 years is real. Like I don't know, everything around me doesn't seem real. Like what is normal? Where's my steady state? I don't know.
Hmm.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's like you lose your foundation, you know. You build a foundation for 2 to 3 years to try and figure out your left foot from your right in the right language. And then you come back and it should be like you're expecting to be like a fish back in water, you know, where you're fully functioning and even better, right? Because you have all this external experience now, you can bring that to bear on whatever your objectives are in life and everything. So you're thinking you're going to come back and be a superhero because you do. You have superhuman patience. You've waited for grand taxis for hours and hours over $1.20. And so you think you're going to come back and have all the answers to all the questions. And in some ways you do, but people don't want answers to their questions. People don't want to know that they're fat and unhappy and stuck in their phones and that their obsession with reality TV is a waste of time. That's and like you don't want to say that. You know, like you think you want to tell people all the mistakes they're making, but you don't feel great walking away from that interaction either. You don't think, "Ah, I finally told so and so, you know, what the real world's about because
Yeah.
I've seen it." You know, it's a wild experience for sure.
It is, and and this kind of comes back to I think why me and people like you have chosen to do Peace Corps in the military is that's real. Like being outside your comfort zone is real, you know. And the UN, I think I mentioned this in our last conversation, but the UN produces this report every year called the UN Happiness Index. And they rank every country in the world and they use these like squishy economic indicators to point to how happy the population of a given country is. Well, Togo, for the 3 years that I was there, ranked dead last. All three of those years in the UN Happiness Index, like below Afghanistan, below Iraq, you
Whoa.
know, below Syria, North Korea. Like Togo was dead last, I'm telling you. And I wouldn't see that going walking around my village. These people were not unhappy. They had very low, you know, levels of disposable income, and the GDP of the country was, you know, Texas shits that out in, you know, a 4 or 5 day span on any given week. So they were very poor and they didn't have access to healthcare and education and whatnot, but they were not unhappy. And I've thought a lot about you know, that complex since leaving Togo. And these people, they did not spend time on screens. They were not on phones. They were always in the moment. They were with their families and their friends in a tight-knit community all the time. They had very little awareness of how they ranked on the UN Happiness Index. They weren't even aware of it. And you come back to the United States and we have access to all the information in the world on this device in our pocket, and people are struggling with mental health issues. Now, I want to be clear that there's a lot of legitimacy out there surrounding mental health for sure. But you have to wonder if our connection via social media and via the internet is part of the problem. We are not spending time building interpersonal connection and relationships physically in the same place as people. It's all online. And you just have to think that like that removing that physicality, that proximity is part of the issue that drives this increase in mental health issues. And honestly, like I've talked to people in my unit when they say that the happiest time for them every single month is when they go to drill, which, like living in barracks in close proximity to people, that's hearing them snore and fart at night, and then spending time in the field. But you know what? I think the human condition needs that. They need that proximity. They need that community. They need that sense that like I matter to this group, this tribe that I'm with, and that my existence is important and helps the tribe move forward. And when you don't have that,
Yeah. No, I love that. What a great tie. I never really considered, I did think, coming back, I thought I knew what a good community looked like. Because you see that, right? If you go to a country where people go to market on Sunday, because Sunday's when you go to market, and everybody's wearing their fancy clothes and they're picking the best carrots or whatever, and you know that so and so is colorblind, so he has his daughter do it or whatever. Like those little things go together to create a beautiful community. And the
Mhm.
truth is the same over on the military side, right? Like if you're staying in barracks and you know that, such and such likes to have his boots on top of his locker because that's where he keeps his stuff, like those are the little things that really make you feel like you're part of a tribe. And yeah, I think you're exactly right. I mean, it's not a surprise to anybody that, being online perpetually and cell phones and spending more time on the internet than you do asleep is going to contribute to a negative mental space.
Mhm.
It's hard to create networks of people and friendships when it's all done through a screen.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think the military is a great place to reignite that love of community. And it comes so naturally because you're there with an objective. You have to do whatever you have to do for that training schedule, and everybody's just trying to get through it as smoothly or easily as possible, or maybe even get the best possible training as well. And there's something about that you just don't find in regular day-to-day life. So I think that's great.
Yeah, and in the military, it's like you need every single body to pull their weight because everybody has a specific role and a job. And if someone misses the cue or they don't show up or they're not pulling their weight, like the whole thing falls apart. And so, like, yes, as going back to like leadership in the military as an officer for sure, like big part of our job is overseeing that organization, making sure all the pieces are moving in concert together towards the commander's intent. But flipping it in reverse, like from that private's perspective, like if you are needed by your tribe to show up every day to do a job, and if you don't, the whole thing falls apart. You're not doing it because you intrinsically as an individual get some sort of gratification from that. You're doing it because you don't want your buddy down.
Right.
And when you're operating in a community that has those that's that closely knit, that's fulfilling. Like I think we need purpose. I think we have to be able like the people who are the happiest and who live the longest wake up every morning with a sense of purpose. And you can create that for yourself for sure. But when you're in a community of people where purpose is woven together with a bunch of other people all needing each other to get from point A to point B every single day, like that matters to the group and to the individual. And those people will continue showing up if that purpose exists. And the military creates that, you know. My friends and my friends and family who are not in the military, but they see me getting up every morning to do PT on my own or working on con ops when I'm not getting paid to do that because I'm not a drill. They don't really get it,
Right.
but I know that like in 2 weeks out of drill, I'm running this huge training. There's a lot of munitions involved. There's a lot high potential for injury. There's going to be, like the S3 is going to be there. It's a big deal. I don't want to screw up because I have an ego and I want to pull off a good training. But I also know that like even if there wasn't like anything else involved and it was just the guys in my unit, like they expect me to come ready and
Hmm.
I don't want to let them down. Just like I know when it's time to do this training, every single one of them are going to show up ready for it. They will have done their work outside of drill. They will have prepared on their own. And I know that because they're good guys and they're good soldiers. And so like if I don't do my part, that will kill me. There's not going to be any ramifications or punishment per se. I will just know in my head that I didn't do everything I could for my tribe. And that's fulfilling. You want to do that. You want to get up in the morning and do those things so that when you go to drill, I'm not going to get a promotion. I'm not going to get a salary raise. I'm not going to get kudos from the commander. I'm not going to get an award. None of that is, there's not, the stakes aren't like that. It's that like they might look at me and they'll say, sir, I know you didn't do everything you could to make this possible. And that would kill me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, I mean it's more than enough. It's more than enough. There's something about, letting down the tribe that is way more valuable than your Army Achievement Medal. You have to be there for the people who are there for you, 100%. No, I think that's great. I think it kind of leads into my next question. You seem like you have mentorship experience. You have your platoon leader, so you act as a leader. I was wondering, in part one, you also said that you always take the call as an RPCV. Why is that important to you? So, just a quick refresher for everybody. Previously, you mentioned if anybody's an RPCV and they find you on LinkedIn, they can always give you a call. Why is mentorship such a priority for you?
So my immediate answer, and I did mention this in the last conversation, is that, when I was nearing the end of my Peace Corps service, I was spending a lot of time doing cold calls. I know I mentioned too that, the internet was not great in Togo, so I was doing what I could. I was putting money on my Skype card. If I could get an international call set up, I could do that. So people took my calls, and it was a lot of return Peace Corps volunteers that I was reaching out to, people who had served decades before me. And I was always blown away by the fact that they would take time out of their day to talk to this dude in Togo who doesn't know what he wants to do with his life, reached out via email, and they said yes, and that meant the world to me at the time because, I don't know that looking back, it had any of those conversations had a tangible impact on my career, but in those moments, it did matter. And to some degree, it made me feel better that it would all be okay when I got home. And so when people reach out to me, I always try to make a conversation happen because of that dynamic. Like somebody afforded me that, and so I want to return that favor. And I can't do it for the person who talked to me, but I can do it for the next generation coming up. And it's kind of, that tribe thing, showing up to drill ready. I would feel like I'm letting down my Peace Corps tribe if I didn't take those calls. But more than that, I mean, mentorship. I think the arc of history changes and bends based on small actions taken every single day by a committed subset of the population. And, stepping out of your way and going that much further for someone, that could be the difference between, the next president of the United States. I don't know, I don't want to be grandiose, but like who knows what that person's capable of. And maybe all they need to unlock that potential is just an extra hand helping them. And it could be as small as, with soldiers in my unit too. I think the human condition just like dictates that we just want to be heard as people. We just want the world to acknowledge our existence and we just want to feel understood. And taking that extra moment at drill to pull a private aside and just be like, hey man, like I noticed you're usually pretty talkative. You're not right now. Like what's going on? I mean, that could be the difference between them making a bad decision and realizing that, hey, the world is watching out for me. Like maybe it's gonna be okay at the end of the day. And again, I say all this and I do all this because people did it for me. The example was set when I was young, and I feel like, it has to be continued as you progress through generations. So yeah, it's a squishy answer. What do
No,
you think?
I think it's a great answer. I think it's a great answer because it's basically saying, you have to believe that you make a difference and you believe that you're making a difference in their lives, which ultimately changes the picture for the whole world. Even if the person that you're talking to doesn't become the president, there's a good chance that somewhere down the line they'll talk to somebody who is, right? And like it may not be 1 degree away, but if you are a positive degree, that's still going to escalate the future. So
Mhm.
I could see the value in that for sure. I want
Yeah, and
to.
we also care about these communities too, right? Like you want the positive impact that's possible from these different institutions and these different communities to you want the positive outcome to be the ultimate reality. Like I care about the Peace Corps. I don't want the Peace Corps to have budget cuts. I don't want there to be a decrease in volunteer numbers across the world. I want that influence to continue, that flame to continue. And so like strengthening bonds between humans is a way to ensure the integrity, the structural integrity of that institution. So
Maintains.
yeah.
100%. No, I know while I was going through Peace Corps, a lot of people said, hey, Peace Corps funding is pretty well secured just because of the RPCVs that come back, and it's a value of ours. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with the origin story of John F. Kennedy on the steps of I think it was Michigan State or College of Michigan, saying, you know what, we're going to create this whole new government organization, and we're just going to make the world a better place through it. And it echoed, and I love that it echoed into 2025. I love that there's still people who hear that today and think, oh, I want to go out and make the world a better place,
Yeah.
not necessarily domestically. And that is the mistake, right? That we all realize while we're away is, oh, I could have, just gone outside and helped my neighbor, but instead I'm helping my neighbor here in Morocco or in Togo or wherever.
Mhm.
It's a powerful lesson, but it is a great organization, and you are obliged to mentor people who go through it because you believe in it. And so I think it's great. I want to double click on why is it or who did you know to reach out for mentorship? Because you said you weren't really sure what you were going to do. How did you go about, finding these mentors? I know LinkedIn makes it super easy nowadays. You can search people by whatever you want, but the hard part then becomes what do you want? And so how did you know what you were aiming for there?
Well, yeah, again, I didn't have LinkedIn at my disposal back then. It existed, but it wouldn't load. Bandwidth was not enough to get LinkedIn going. There's two people that really kind of made a lot of the networking possible for me. My Peace Corps origin story application story that I tell doesn't usually include this component, but the first time I remember seriously considering applying for the Peace Corps, I think it might have been my sophomore, junior year of college, and I read the student newspaper on campus, and they did this expose about a guy, a student. I think he was getting his PhD at the time, and he just seemed like an Indiana Jones figure. He had like traveled the world and he had served in the Foreign Service and he did the Peace Corps and he came back to Iowa State and maybe he's getting his a master's degree of some kind, but he's back here for a couple of years being a student and then he had this other thing he was lined up to go off and do. I remember reading the student newspaper. I was sitting in a biology class. I remember just being like, I don't know who this guy is, but he's a fucking. I want to be him. Like I don't know what he did to get there, but like and they have this picture of him and he has this gruff beard and it's like him in Nepal and he's got like his Sherpa that he climbed like part of Mount Everest with and he's just giving you this like Indiana Jones like most interesting man in the world look and you're just like I was like, I want to, oh, I don't care. I don't know who he is, but I just want to be him. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then his email at the bottom of it. And so I just sent him an email right there in class. I was like, hey, dude, I read the article about you in the paper. I've always thought about the Peace Corps. It looks like you did the Peace Corps. Like, would love to just connect. And he emailed back right away. And he was like, let's get coffee. And I met up with him and got coffee. we had a great conversation, and we stayed in contact for years after that. One of the so after I got to Village, I had only been there for a couple of weeks, and I got this call on my Nokia burner. I didn't have cell reception in my village, so I had my phone like in my pocket, and I was like walking out of my village, and it started ringing. So I pick it up, and he was like, "Hey, this is so and so. So how you doing?" And I was like, "Holy crap!" He's like, "Yeah, I've been calling for the last couple hours. I figured you're probably in a place without cell phone reception, but I was like, at one of these calls will get through." And he's like, "Hey," and you picked up. It worked, and I was like, "That's amazing." He's like, "Yeah, I just wanted to call and see check in on you and see how it's going in Village." And I was like, "How did you even find my number?" But also, that means the world to me, man. Like, I'm in over my head. I'm overwhelmed. I'm, I'm shitting my brains out right now. I
Never
don't know the
been so
language.
lost.
Everybody in Village is trying to marry off their daughter to me right now. I'm just like, it's so awkward. I don't know what to do. And like, I don't even, I can't find food. I'm starving. Having a partial mental breakdown talking to this guy. And he was just like, I get it, dude. He was like 100. And I just felt like I could talk to him.
Right.
Anyway, he went off and did some like crazy stuff. Like I said, I think he ended up as an FBI agent now, but he was doing all this, and he just was like, he's like, "So yeah, what do you want to do after Peace Corps, man? Like, I know you got a couple years left, but he's like, I'm here to help you. Just let me know, like, when you're doing your soul searching, like, I'll find some people to connect you with, and like, you don't have to know what you want to do, but like, somebody helped me when I was in the Peace Corps. They were like mentoring me, and he's like, I'm returning the favor. So he's like, anything I can do to help, like, just feel free to call, text, if you can email, but." I'll pull strings and tap in my personal and professional networks, and I'll set up calls for you. And I just was overwhelmed with gratitude because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I want. I don't know. I think I'm probably going to get sold to
Yeah.
somebody in this village at some point. Like, I don't even know what's going on.
Right.
And the other person was my mother had a really good friend from childhood that had done the Peace Corps in the 80s. And she made repeated attempts, like again, to call me. Couldn't get through most of the time. Eventually, I picked up the phone, and it was this woman, and she was like, "Hey, I remember what it was like to be in your shoes. Like, I have all these friends in DC. Like, I can help connect you to people there." So it was just really people who had done the Peace Corps that cared about the next generation that's going through that same experience, and they just moved heaven and earth to help put me in contact with people. You know what I mean? So
That's That's amazing. No, I think it's funny. I'm asking specifically, so how do you know which mentor to reach out to? And you
mhm.
talk about these two incredible stories, and the question still remains, well, how do you know who to? And it sounds like you just reach out to the person who's most interesting at the time, just shot in the dark, see what happens, and it compounded. Is that accurate?
Yeah, no. So like when I'm taking these calls and I'm talking to or, these doing these video calls with currently serving Peace Corps volunteers, or even people that are from a different generation that haven't done the Peace Corps, when they ask for like career advice, what I tell them is just search out people that you have heard of or that you see online or that you've met or you go to a lecture. Seek out people doing interesting stuff that you would want to do and just cold call them because these people are going to want to talk about what they've done. And they like the fact that there's people out there that find their life story interesting. They will talk to you. If you go to a lecture, if you see a podcast interview, if you hear about somebody in the paper, local paper, or even national paper, and they're doing something that you think is awesome, if you see people that are living the life that you want to live, just just reach out, man. That's how if there's one thing I've been really good at in life, it's cultivating mentors. And it's because I'm constantly keeping my eyes open for people doing cool stuff that I want to be a part of.
Dang.
And then I just
Cool.
cold call them.
And then and then you just shoot your shot. That's great. I think it's great.
It doesn't always work out, but like, even if it's 1 in 10 times, I mean, if you're shooting your shot on a regular basis when you're seeing cool stuff taking place, like it is like there will be opportunities that open up.
100%. No, I think it's great. I think it's a great message about mentorship that's often overlooked. You know, people are trying to figure out how to sign off on their emails or how to, you know, figure out who's the best at whatever drop shipping or whatever it is. And the truth of it is just figure out A, what you want to do and who's doing it, figure out what the interesting thing is and ask and then you're off to the races. It's great.
Because life doesn't owe you anything, you know, and like the army will pound that into you if you don't currently think that, right? Like life, you're not you're there's no you have no rights. Like life doesn't owe you anything. It's up to you to cultivate these opportunities for yourself. They're not going to come to you. They're not going to seek you out. You as an like one of the biggest frustrations about society right now is that we're all trying to be gods. Like we all want to be special and we all want to matter. But the problem is there's not enough space in this world for everybody to be special. There just isn't. There are special people. There's a lot of people who are just who are here for a brief blip on the screen and then they disappear forever, right? And you have to accept the fact that you are one of you just don't matter. You're not special. Your life is insignificant. And if that is your starting point, I mean, you don't operate as if you have something to lose.
Right. Everything after that's cake. It's all winning after
Yeah.
that.
You win and lose because of the efforts that you make. The problem is when people start becoming successful and they make a lot of money, then they start playing defense because they have shit to protect. And living life like that is where you cease seizing opportunities. And you can't start from that mentality. You can't start from a defensive mentality. You have to be on offense.
Yeah. Go
It's my
out and
biggest
get it.
problem with the Minnesota Vikings is they play defensive offense and it just they don't take opportunities. They don't shoot for the for the moon. Right? They do the 3 yard digs. They do the run right up the middle. It just drives me nuts.
Nobody's aiming for the stars.
Yeah,
I like it. I
yeah.
mean, why not? If you decide, like, the truth of it is, there is power in acknowledging one's own insignificance. Like, as soon as you're saying, you know, anything like, I don't matter, the world's yours after that. You know,
Mhm.
you can go get it.
Yeah.
So,
And you have to maintain that mentality too, even if you become successful. I just read Carl Sagan's Cosmos.
okay.
He spends a lot of that book talking about how insignificant we are as individuals in the grand scheme of things. And obviously he's an astrophysicist, so he thinks in terms of billions of planetary systems that are out there. We are very insignificant in that respect. But I think it's a social lesson as well, because if you realize that, the world doesn't care about your issues. Posting about your struggles with whatever on social media, the struggles still exist. You haven't done anything tangibly to address them.
Hmm.
You have to take action. So,
Heck yeah. I love it. I think it's a great message. Just go out and get it. I think that's great.
mhm.
Is there anything else that you wanted to share? We're coming up on time here. Is there anything that we've missed today?
Well, I know that we kind of blew your outline, but I think it's okay. I'm interested. You have section 7 on here that says staying mission oriented. What is your current why?
Presently, it's chow to chow, right? I'm just trying to get through annual training. I think a lot of people have AT coming up, and so I'm hoping, we got a nice home station annual training.
Hmm.
Got my daughter at a year and 3 months, so I'm just gonna try and maintain family life and work life and everything life-wise for the next little bit. Of course, overall, like we said, that Peace Corps vibe, you can't shake it. You want to make a difference in the world. So I do. I want to empower, soldiers to make the best out of their career, as well as youth that are trying to join the military and older folks, 35 and anywhere and in between who's trying to join the military. By all means, I want to help those people to get in at the highest level, something that was missing in my life when I joined the Peace Corps was intentionality. I didn't aim at anything, kind of like you were saying. It's not necessarily that I had this entitlement where I thought the world owed me something, but at the same time, I also didn't know to look. I didn't know to look at, maybe I could be a X volunteer instead of a Y volunteer. Maybe I could go to this continent versus that continent. Never considered any of that. And so I'd like to think that over my time as an ASVAB instructor, the people that I've helped, they're living lives of intention because they're spending the time to increase their score and go out and get the careers that they want. And so that's what I would say is my why. I definitely don't want to let you off the hook on that one either, though. So what would you say is your why?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that. Well, on the surface, I just got engaged, so I'm very much thinking about, family and building a life, trying to buy a house. My parents are getting older, so I just want to make sure I'm still there for them. Kind of the same thing as you're talking about, doing right by my soldiers and all of that stuff. But you bring up intentionality. For me, intentionality and purpose, like they run hand in hand, right? I think everybody needs to have purpose when they wake up in the morning, and that can be big or small, but just something that when you open your eyes in the morning, you're like, somebody's relying on me. I'm relying on somebody. I have a reason to get up and follow through on my obligations. And then intentionality. And that's something that I think I have purpose. I think I'm still working on intentionality because that for me is like, I don't want to just scroll through Netflix and watch whatever it is. I want to, I want to watch a good, I'm big into storytelling. I want to hear a good story. I want to be moved. If I pick up a book, I don't want it to be just some sort of squishy, rom-com. I want to learn something about the world. I'm going out to happy hour. I want to have a good conversation with people. You only have so many minutes on this planet. You only have so many days. Like using the time that I have with intention, and focusing on not just treading water. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
100%. No, I mean, the previous segment, the depth was pretty deep, acknowledge your insignificance. Like that is a depth that I will tell you we don't come up with on this podcast very often. But it's a value, and you're right. Anybody who's taking the time to listen to this, you could make somebody's life better by saying something like that.
mhm.
So, while, there are episodes on here about finding the perimeter of a square or something like that, it's not that long-term lesson that you can apply for, forever. So I think it's great.
Well, like it's applicable in many different ways too. Now I know that we're trying to wrap up here, but it's like if you acknowledge your insignificance, that's not supposed to be like nothing matters and my life is insignificant and therefore it doesn't matter if I live or die, right? No, that's not the point that I'm trying to make here. It's that the grand scheme of things is large.
Right.
And if you fuck up the ASVAB and you don't get the score you want, that's okay. Because then you enter into service, and if you wake up with purpose and intention and you work hard, your superiors will see that, and you will be able to open up opportunities afterwards that maybe your ASVAB score didn't for you in the moment. And it's the same thing with like studying for the ACT or studying for the GR whatever.
GRE, GMAT. Yep.
GRE, yeah.
Yep.
Because it's like, if you have that mindset where like, like we are insignificant, like I'm going to study hard for the GRE, but if I don't get the score I want, like that sucks, but it's okay
Right.
because the world is big and the opportunities are endless if you keep your eye open and you're willing to just push on the door.
Right. And play offense. That's great.
Play offense. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, awesome. Well, Sean, thank you so much. Thanks for coming on. It was great having you. If anybody wants to look up Sean's on LinkedIn at Sean Lundy, and he's got a great LinkedIn presence. So definitely RPCVs and fellow military members, definitely reach out. And then the RPCV Ventures looks like an awesome thing. So anybody who's just looking at this because it's got Peace Corps in it, if you're trying to make your business better, it sounds like I'm definitely interested. So I'll be looking into that myself. So
Yeah, feel free to reach out at, as always, we're trying to build a whole network of an entrepreneurial ecosystem based on service. So RPCVs, we're actually expanding our scope here pretty soon to military-owned businesses as well. So there is a nice crossover there. But if you've served your country, we want to invest in you because you have that other dimension, that other characteristic that's needed to be successful in the world of business. So,
oh
yeah.
yeah, love it. Well, Sean, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man.